founder and owner of Diversify New York LLC. And so we are so delighted to have him to share in this series with us. And we're looking forward to series number 2. So welcome.
Thank you very much. Welcome back, everyone who is rejoining us from our first session. Thank you warmly for the introduction, Dr. Coward. As she mentioned, I am a Syracuse native, a Syracuse University graduate. I majored in finance at Syracuse. It is one of my passions to be able to teach my folks to become more financially literate and fluent. As I've mentioned, the difference between our community and many other communities is they are far more economically fluent than we are. It is why I have put my energy into educating and uplifting my own community to make sure that we are on the same plane as many other communities. Some of the things that I'd like to reiterate why I am impassioned the way I am, some statistics that I mentioned from the first class, including the fact that the Black community in the United States is the only community demographic in the country that is slated to have a negative net worth by the year 2025. This means if you consider all of the demographics in the country, white, Latino, Asian, and many other cultures, the only culture that is slated to have a negative net worth in the United States by the year 2025 is the Black community. There are many factors that we can consider, including this nation's history. I don't have to reiterate that for many of my ancestors and many of my elders that are also present in the room. You know, we have a long entrenched history in this country, including being economically exploited for a great number of years. We were not allowed to own land, which is the biggest factor in terms of the wealth gap that exists in this country. One other statistic that I will bring up again, the wealth gap. That means the distance between the white households and Black households in this country and how much more wealth that they have than a Black household is currently around 14 to 1. This means for every $1 that we have in a Black household, typically a white household has about $14 in expenses, or not expenses, and funds to spend, expendable money, compared to us. So there's a 14 to 1 difference, and land ownership is part of that. The focus of our first seminar, we spent a majority of the time looking at one of the pillars of economic education, and that was simply credit and access to credit. We talked about and we reviewed credit reports, how every American is entitled to one free credit report per year. We mentioned the number of credit bureaus that exist in the United States that monitor your credit as an adult. We mentioned the age that you need to be to access credit. You need to be 18 and older. I told some anecdotal stories about my very first lessons in financial literacy. And for those of you who remember and who grew up in similar circumstances as my mom had 6 children. It was unfortunately very difficult to raise 6 kids during that time. But psychologically, the things that I learned very early on, I needed to unlearn as an adult in terms of what financial responsibility looked like, what good financial stewardship. So we are in a house of God. And one of the things that I know that I can share with you all and you all can relate to, it is a mission, not only a mission, it is a direct edict from God for us to become good stewards. And that includes financial stewards. My principal put it in a way when I was in high school that said, to whom much is given, much is expected. And that includes those of us who have the knowledge. So we may not have been given much in terms of assets that were left to us or things that we inherited. But once we have the information, it is up to us to not only empower ourselves, but to leave that generational knowledge behind. I was having a very earnest conversation with this young lady in the back today, and we were talking about some of the things that she gained. I was very happy. So again, the focus of the first seminar was on accessing credit reports. We talked about credit cards. Some of the things that were mentioned during that seminar, we talked about the balances on your credit card. Does anyone remember what percentage of a credit card that you should never go over? If you have a credit card limit, what is the maximum that you should put on that credit card at any one time? 1/3. Does anyone remember that? So we're going to do some brief review to talk about why that's important. The reason why you should never spend more than 1/3 of a balance on a credit card is because it has an immediate impact on your credit score once you do spend more than 1/3. And I'm so glad you're so attentive to that. So it's good that we have some new folks that are in the room that is going to hear some information. So pardon it if you've heard it and you've retained it, but we do have some new folks here, and I want to make sure that they retain it. So this means if you had a credit card that had a limit of $1,000, you should never spend more than $333 on that credit card. The moment that you start carrying balances on that credit card, you also begin to impact your credit score. So one of the things that I'm very proud of, the first thing she did when she walked in was come to tell me how she immediately attacked those credit cards, got those balances paid down on those credit cards, and now is focused on the discipline, lowered the balances on there, and is focused on the discipline of maintaining those cards at a rate that will not impact her credit score in the future. One of the other things that's so critical about that lesson is today, you may not need access to that credit, but the discipline that you establish is there for the time that you do need it in the event of an emergency. And so the focus of today's workshop, by the way, we're going to be talking about savings and why doing something like she did, which was lowering those balances on those credit cards, will enable her to take the savings. Her car payment is now almost paid off. She gets to apply one payment left. And now what do we do with the savings from that payment that's left over? How do we attack what's there? What are some savings plans that we all should have? I have some questions that were taken from the first seminar. We'll go through those before we get into savings. So I want to make sure I answer the questions that were left over from the first seminar. Question? Yes, I have one already.
I just want to clarify how you use like a third.
Yes.
A third of the credit card?
Yes.
I'm a point person. I love using my credit card for all my points.
Yes.
So if I'm paying it off, is it?
Yes. If you're going to pay it off during the month. And the one thing that you have to be careful of, right? I grew up in a period where 30 days was a cycle. Some credit cards are no longer 30 days. They operate on a 21-day cycle. So if you are carrying that balance and it's a full balance and it's over the 21-day limit, it absolutely will impact you. And so your score will automatically be lowered because you have reached the credit limit based on the cycle of that credit card. So it's very important. We went over fine print, the tiny, tiny, tiny words. When you're watching those TV commercials and they're talking really fast and they say, well, here's an aspirin for a headache, but it may cause liver failure, heart disease, amputation, diabetes. Sometimes the medicine isn't worth what you're taking, right? So you have to pay attention to the details that are in there. I implore each of you, and especially if you have multiple accounts, to go home and review the details of that account. Not only should you be particularly keen to what interest rate that you are being charged. If you're being charged in excess of 20% interest, for example, I heard some interest rates that are in the 28%. And think about that. I need access to some money. Someone's going to charge me 28% in order to use it. If I'm making minimal payments on that money, that 28% interest is accumulating every month that balance is not paid off, putting me further into the hole, right? So it sounds good today. I may be able to access it. But as we say with money and financial literacy. A bird in the hand beats two in the bush. So if you have cash today, it is always more imperative that you use cash as opposed to credit. Does this mean you should not have and utilize credit? Absolutely not. It is that cash is king. You're going to pay less when you utilize money as opposed to a credit line. Okay? So, question number one that we got back. Someone asked, who remembers what Credit Karma is? How many of you know what Credit Karma is? Credit Karma. So the difference, and I'm glad that you mentioned that. So this gentleman said Credit Karma is a place that I can go to check my credit. Absolutely correct. The second part of your answer was, is it like Experian? And that part of the answer is no, it is not like Experian. And this is why we have these workshops, right? I know a lot of people have the perception that Credit Karma is an actual credit bureau or someone authorized to actually give you a legal credit score. Credit Karma is not. Credit Karma is a financial management company that gives you an approximation, meaning that they're guessing your credit score based on a number of factors that they have access to, but they are not one of the three. There are only three legal credit bureaus in the United States. They are Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. Those are the only three credit bureaus that are the legal credit bureaus that operate on something called a FICO score. The other difference between Credit Karma and those three legal credit bureaus, Credit Karma utilizes something called a Vantage score as opposed to a FICO score. Remember the differences in the score when we talked about that in class 1? A FICO score is based on 850. A Vantage score was based on how many points? 900. Very good. Somebody paid attention. So yes, a Vantage score was based on 900. So the difference is when you go to utilize sites like Credit Karma, which you should not do, some of the information that we gave in class 1 included where to obtain your legal credit report free of charge. Every American is entitled to access your credit report from each one of the bureaus one time per year. That information was contained, and it was, Maria, would you mind advancing to the slide that had the information with the credit bureau information, please? Thank you right there, Maria. Thank you so much. These are the three credit reporting bureaus for those of you who may have missed the information. It contains the actual links to there, as well as the phone numbers. For those of you who are tech savvy, you can take a screenshot of this and be able to save it utilizing your phone. But you can access your one free credit report per year from one of these three credit bureaus using the information contained within. One of the other things that we talked about when getting access to that credit report, you're entitled to one per bureau per year. If I got all three of my credit reports in January of 2023, when is the next time I can get access to my credit report? Free. Of 2024, right? So what was the method that we talked about in getting access to there? We wanted to get access, one, in the first trimester or the first 4 months of the year, right? So January through April, we would contact Experian, and then May, August, I have to use fingers. May through August, we want to get through TransUnion, and then September through December, we can access our credit report from Equifax. The other place that you're entitled to get those credit reports is www.annualcreditreport.com. That is a congressional website, meaning it was authorized by Congress in order for you to access this information. These are how you can access it through these companies directly, but www.annualcreditreport.com is where you can also access your free credit report. So Again, that was question number one. Who is Credit Karma? So now we know that Credit Karma is a financial management company. They have access to some financial data. And in exchange for your personal information, this is what we all need to be privy to. And then I'll get to your question. They give you access to an approximation of your credit score in exchange for your personal information so that they can give you solicited ads that they have targeted to you. So how do they make their money? It's free for you because they take your personal information, they sell it to other companies that generate ads that they then target to you in hopes that you will utilize the services that are on there. So that is the difference. If you use these sources, they will not do the same. Big difference. Yes, you had a question. Okay. Okay.
And they gave you some information, but then they charged me $29 a month to give me information every month, and I didn't know they was taking the money out for about 6 months.
Wow.
Like, who's taking my money?
Oh,
And
wow.
I found out.
This is why it's so critically important. I know some of this information may seem mundane for some of the folks here, and it may seem, I don't need that information. This is why we talk about that information. The things that we take for granted that we personally know, the person next to us may not know. And if we don't discuss this out in the open, and again, this is the difference, our community is no less savvy than any other community. We lack the information that other communities have that would keep us afloat. So very important, please make sure that you share that information, especially for folks that are in your age demographic. I know I'm approached routinely with folks that are saying, Ricky, I looked at my Credit Karma score and I know I can go buy me a house. And I have to have the conversation with them all the time that banks don't utilize Credit Karma when giving you access to credit or giving you a mortgage. You need a legal credit score from one of the credit bureaus, authorized bureaus, and then have the conversation about where to get those reports and how to read the reports if they're there. So question 2 was, what might the process be for the first-time home buyers and how to save up for buying a home? Very important question. I touched base on this when the class first started, and I talked about the difference in the wealth gap and why it exists. The primary reason that the wealth gap exists in the United States is because white households own land and real estate where many black households don't. So the difference that accounts for their wealth is because they own homes. So it's very critical we begin to get into the space where we talk about what home ownership looks like, why real estate is so critical to building a savings for yourself. I had a discussion in the beginning of class about one of the fastest ways to build a savings nest egg. People don't typically look at a house as savings. When I say savings, the first thing that comes to mind for many folks is a bank account, maybe some money under the mattress if you're older and don't trust banks, right? The brown paper bag, anything except an actual asset that accumulates in value, which is also a savings vehicle. So home ownership is critically important. One of the very first steps, as this thing is asking me, is what are the first steps to owning home ownership? We mastered that in class 1. That is a detailed knowledge of what your credit looks like, because you will need access to mortgage lending in order to qualify for a home. Unless you inherited a bunch of money. I think the typical home in Syracuse is somewhere in the $150,000 range. And God bless those of you who are able to inherit that or inherit homes from other members of your family. For those of us who weren't, typically, this will be the largest loan that many of you will ever have access to in your life will be your mortgage. So it is critically important that you understand that to put yourself in a position in order to qualify for a mortgage. And one of the ways that you're going to do that, again, is making sure that you understand your credit report, what your credit scores look like. In particular, we mentioned that there are 3 different credit bureaus. When you go to the bank to access that mortgage, you need to speak to the bank directly to ask them which credit bureaus are they using to actually pull your credit report to qualify you for a home mortgage. So every bank does not use the same credit bureaus. For instance, the bank that I went through used two different credit bureaus. They used TransUnion and they used Experian. They did not use Equifax. One of the reasons why you need to get an access to your credit report from each one of the different bureaus is they may have erroneous information reported on one of your reports from one of the different bureaus. How many of you remember how many credit reports, what percentage of credit reports actually have errors listed on them? Anyone remember the percentile? And it's fairly high. I'll give you a cheat. It's way over 70%. It's over 80%. It's close to 90%, somewhere in the 90 percentile of credit reports have erroneous information on there. Some of the information could be as little. Dr. Cowart alluded to this in the beginning. She said, Ricky T. Brown. She was very specific in mentioning my middle initial. She was so specific with mentioning that because she has heard me detail the issues that I have run into with the three Rickies that are in my family, including my dad and my first cousin. We all share the same name. So there are three Ricky Browns. And again, he went to access his mortgage, and this is Ricky L. Brown, went to access his mortgage, but all of my credit information was being reported on his credit report, and he was nearly denied that loan because they thought that he was carrying an additional $50,000 in student loan debt, which was not his. It was technically mine. This is how important it is that you're going over your credit reports to understand what information is there. So not only could there be name misspellings, there could be erroneous reports of debt that you may have cleared. There could be debt that is assigned to you that does not belong to you, including what happened to my cousin. So those step one we talked about, that question for me was, what are the steps in that home buying process? One, access to that credit report, understanding how your credit scores will impact your access to be able to get a mortgage. Two, making sure that when you went into the bank that is going to qualify you for a home mortgage loan, you understood what credit bureaus they are utilizing to access your score. Why does that matter? Because the rate that you will be assigned is determined by your credit score. To give you a calculation of how much that impacts what you will pay for a home, if I bought a home in the same neighborhood, I lived right next door to Mr. Carter, Pastor Carter. Pastor Carter bought a home for $200,000, but he had A1 credit. And so he got the very lowest rate that the bank would offer. And myself, I come in, I'm anxious. I want to live, keeping up with the Joneses, right? This is what they're keeping up with the Carters. I want to live next to Pastor Carter so bad. I go into the bank and my credit is less than stellar, but they're still willing to offer me a mortgage. And they say, Ricky, we're going to give you a mortgage for only 1% higher. His is 3%. We're going to give it to you for 4%. It's not that much higher, right? How long is a typical mortgage? 30 years. For that 1% interest, how much do you think more I will pay for my mortgage over those 30 years than Pastor Carter? 10,000? 20,000? 30,000? 40,000? $50,000 more I will pay for that same exact house next door to Pastor Carter with that 1% in interest difference. So it is very important. This is why I'm emphasizing this over and over again about not only the access to the credit report, understanding how your credit score is reached, and making sure that you're obtaining the lowest possible rate for whatever you are qualifying yourself for, including that home mortgage. So all of those things are a factor in what are the steps to home ownership. Again, understanding that credit report, making sure you understand what bureau and the bank that will issue your home mortgage is giving you, understanding the rate that you will be assigned to make sure you can truly afford that home over the life of a 30-year mortgage as well. And then there are some additional resources which we had out on the table last week, but I'll quickly go over them. For those of you who are unfamiliar with an agency called Home Headquarters, Home Headquarters is a local not-for-profit organization. They teach something called the First-Time Home Buyer Course. And as a matter of fact, it is now a federal requirement. You cannot obtain a mortgage without going through an accredited first-time home buyer program. The reason that is now a law is because we talked about in 2009, the financial crisis, the biggest wealth transfer in the history of the United States, where more Black folks lost their homes than any other, largely due to the fact that we were educated in terms of understanding the mortgage industry. Our homes were foreclosed on at a higher rate, and they took those homes back. So now education is a part of that. Home Headquarters will walk you through what those steps are. They will talk about your credit. They will introduce you to all of the professionals that you need in order to access that, and talk about the exact steps to home ownership. I'm sorry? No, that came out in actually about 2010. So now, anytime that you go into a bank right now, if you go and apply for a mortgage, they will tell you, bring me your first-time home buyer certificate. And the reason is that it's something called the Dodd-Frank Act, where now the federal government made it easier for you to sue a bank. Before, banks were putting us into loans, how us as brown people got in that situation. We used to be able to walk into a bank, believe it or not. Folks were so unscrupulous that they would say, I don't need any documentation. Tell me how much you make. And you can say, you know, I'm a nurse and I make 35, but I'll come in and I'll just tell them I make 100,000 and I'll see what the bank says. And they went, fine, we don't care if you can afford it or not. We're going to give you the loan. And they signed those papers and they gave us the homes because they knew they were going to take them back eventually, right? So it's easy to get you into the home. It's a lot easier to be able to maintain and keep it. And unfortunately, for many of us, we got ourselves into situations where we went into those kind of loan situations. We weren't savvy. We signed paperwork that we didn't truly understand. Someone just talked to me about an adjustable rate mortgage and not understanding that her daughter had, someone had leveraged their home for their daughter's wedding, refinanced the home, and thought she was getting a fixed rate. A fixed rate means I'm going to be paying the same thing every month. And she wasn't paying the same thing every month. Guess what happened? The mortgage kept rising and rising and rising. The small details. Remember, the fine print is what's going to cost you in the end. So again, Home Headquarters is an organization that will help you wade through that sort of information for first-time home buyers. Yes. Yeah.
Title or something like that. I've heard about it's easy for people to steal your home if you're not checking something. You know anything about that?
It is possible. Let me put it this way. Yes, it's a little bit off, but just quickly, especially for those of us who have elders and who want to pay attention to where we're in situations where we're being good financial stewards for our elders, because many times we grow into a position where they've saved their whole lives. They have 401ks put away, their homes are paid for. There are some folks that had gone around and they will steal mortgages, right? They'll come up and tell some of your elders, I'm signing you up for X, Y, and Z, or we're gonna put some windows or something, right? We're gonna help you because you don't have the cash immediately to do it. And they sign something that places a lien against the home is one way, right? And if they can't meet or satisfy the exorbitant cost of those windows or what have you, someone will come in and foreclose on the home and take the home that way. One of the other ways is they do some deed manipulation where they'll go down and sign something called a quitclaim deed and essentially steal the mortgage from up under you. It's not as simple as just being able to walk in and be able to do that. But yes, it is possible. These are still talks that we need to have to make sure, especially again, when we have elders, that you're just having and broaching the conversation with them. You want to tell them to be particularly careful if someone just comes and knocks on the doors and starts promising them the world, and especially as it relates to their assets. Don't sign anything without someone present. Make sure that you have a financial advisor or a relative who can help you review this contract before you sign, but never sign over anything related to your home without somebody reviewing that contract and that has your back. So that's the advice that I would give for any of my elders that are there, family members as well. So what is the impact of paying off a mortgage early? Can anyone think of anything bad that would happen? Not necessarily bad. What are some of the pros and cons of paying off a mortgage early? So I have someone who's paying off a car. They have one car payment left early. Can you think of any cons to paying off that car early? She no longer has a car payment, right? So now she has whatever X amount of hundreds of dollars that she would have been putting on that car payment free to go towards something else, right? With a mortgage, it's a little bit different. For those of you who are savvy enough and have gone through situations where you own a home, tax time every year we look forward to because we get to make some deductions, right? Some of those deductions include the mortgage interest that you are paying on that home yearly. For those of you who are in an income bracket where you need those tax deductions, otherwise you're going to have a bigger obligation to Uncle Sam, you get to deduct not only the property taxes that are there, but again, the mortgage interest that you have paid on that house every year for, 25, 30 years or whatever. And if you pay it off early, you're losing that. So now you don't get that tax deduction at the end of the year. Otherwise, if you do not have that mortgage payment, much the same as not having that car payment, you're now free to either spend that money or place it, save, right? Because that's the right thing to do, would be able to save that money, or it can go into an alternative investment. There are things, if you're really risk averse like myself, and especially the older I get, the less risk I like to take with money, right? So treasury bonds and things that are super safe that come from the federal government, they don't pay as high of an interest, but I know my money will be there at the end of the day. When I was younger and I could afford more risk, I was aggressive and I invested in other places. I bought a second home, right? And so that second home allowed me to collect rental income. Just because it's an investment, is there any guarantee that I'm going to make money off of something that I place my money in? Absolutely not. There is still an opportunity that you would lose money if you place that money incorrectly, or if you placed it into something that you weren't savvy about or weren't able to control. And that's typically it. So the more risk, the higher the interest rate that's assigned to there, but the greater the opportunity that you could lose that investment as well. So the thing for me, the most aggressive thing that I would do is I would want to build my savings nest egg. So we're getting into some territory that I want to cover for today's class as well. And for those of you who are approaching and getting near the age where retirement and your retirement income becomes a factor, it's critically important, especially this young man and this young lady, this young man, this young lady, this one. Very important you guys understand how important it is to start saving early. The earlier you start to save, the more comfortable you will be in retirement. And if someone would have told me I could have saved as little as $200 per month, if you starting when you're 21, you could retire a millionaire. If you saved as little as $200 per month, starting when you were 21. And look at all of us that are over 21, like, why didn't somebody tell me this way back then, right? So the problem with many of us is the discipline, not having the discipline to understand I need to do this. The thing that we do is we always think that we have time. We think that we have time. And before you know it, we're here. And what most of those folks will tell you, learn from us and our mistakes that are well past your 21. We can't get back the years that we didn't know that we didn't take advantage of putting that money away. But you can watch some of our elders are in a position, unfortunately, where they struggle now. And a lot has to do with the fact that they failed to build a suitable nest egg for themselves. The older we get, the more health implications, the more it's going to cost us to be able to maintain ourselves in the way that we like. And so if you have a certain lifestyle, young folks, that you like living, you want to make sure you maintain that lifestyle. You don't want to go from jet setting all over London and the Caribbean and all these other places, and then you get to a stage where you're retired and you can no longer afford to do the things that make you comfortable and make you happy. So again, you need to aggressively start saving now for those goals. And again, $200 per month, starting at 21, you can retire a millionaire.
And for those who are that age, if your job has a credit union, it's the best way to save.
So one territory that you're going into that I didn't understand, and I'm glad you brought this up. If your job has something called a matched savings plan, right? Now look at all of us elders are in here like, now I remember when I first got pulled to the side, my job had something that was a 6% match, meaning they would match up to 6%. Later, I moved to a job that had as high as 9%. They would match up to 9% of everything that I was putting away. And when I thought about it, like the HR person came in and sat to me, and I'm so grateful to God that I had someone that showed me, even majoring in finance, I was young and thought that I had time. And the first job, she comes to me and she says, I noticed you're one of the only people in the company that are not saving any money. You're not putting money away. I see your check stub. We do a 6% match. So not only are you failing to save for yourself, you're not taking the money we're trying to give you. I want you to take this money, and you're one of the only people that are not taking the money. Before I knew it, that money comes out every week. You never see it. I was not even paying attention to the pay stub. Before I knew it, I looked up and I had $40,000 in an account from that job that I had no idea. Like when I tell you that look that you have on your face, that was mine the first time they showed me. And I'm like, where did I didn't even understand how it worked at the time. But I implore you, if you have an opportunity to take advantage of a match savings plan with your retirement, do it. Not only, so we already talked about some of the tax implications, it's a greater tax shelter for you. Not only are you putting the money away and saving it for yourself tax-free at the time, you're also lowering your tax burden at the same time. That money is not taxed when you're putting it away in the retirement. So you're helping yourself twofold by taking advantage of that, and threefold when you consider you're taking the extra money that that company is giving to you every time they match that savings. All right, young folks, make sure you're putting some of that away. And then how to put together a budget. This is really critical for those households to understand what your budgets look like. I just talked about me personally. My budget looks a lot different than when I was in my early teens. The things that I coveted and cherished earlier before there were family implications, before there was home ownership and I had household implications, before there were retirement considerations. I felt like I can go spend my money on anything, right? So I shopped a lot, I got to travel a lot, but then those priorities changed as I grew older and I started a family. And again, now it was about legacy building, it was about wealth building, and it was about not leaving behind the legacy of debt that my family had unfortunately left me with. For those of you who missed class one, some of the things that I mentioned in terms of my personal experiences, my family was not very privy to some information financially. Oftentimes we failed to prepare by means of health insurance, life insurance, of many other factors that led to the fact that when our family members would die, we typically had to come out of pocket in order to pay for those burial expenses. One thing that I hate using is when we use the term unforeseen. I think it's pretty seen, right? I think we all know we were born to get to one place. We know that's not unforeseen. So it's seen, we choose not to see it, right? And that's what happens with many of our family members. We choose not to see it. We still think that we have time. We ignore all of the clues and all of the mercy God kind of gave us when oftentimes I see those same family members. They had won a lottery ticket for $30,000. They got a settlement here, and then you go to bury them, and they didn't have one single dollar put away for their own burial expenses. Someone has to buy the burial clothes. We have to pay for the coffin. We have to pay for the burial site. And I lived through that trauma several times, starting with my grandmother, who only had 3 children. And for whatever reason, those 3 children weren't prepared to bury my grandmother. The cycle repeated when my mom unfortunately passed and also did not have life insurance. So this was a lesson that I took very personal. And I had to become the financial steward for my family. This is when I took over in that situation and said, we're going to start having some earnest talks about what this looks like. Because what I wanted to get across is, as a family person now, my number one obligation in terms of being a good financial steward was to my offspring. And so the more that I am taking away from them and their inheritance to give to other family members who had failed to plan and put themselves in a position to be able to take care of themselves, I'm actually perpetuating that cycle by not leaving him anything if I gave it all to you guys because you failed to do it, right? So we have to take personal accountability. I love the word account in there. We have to take personal accountability in terms of our savings and our future and what that looks like. So when it comes to building a household budget, the number one advice that I would give you is you're not just saving for today. A budget isn't based off of what you're doing today. It should be based off of the future as well. All of the considerations that you will have over a timeline. If you are advancing in age, for example, we mentioned some of the other things like increased healthcare costs. If there were going to be considerations for if I'm going to live in a community that supports elders or what have you, what's going to happen to my mortgage? I can't tell you how many folks that I know that were in a position that were close to retirement, and they made a huge financial mistake by doing something like, I'm going to refinance my home, right? They wait till 5 years before retirement and say, I'm going to go refinance my home. Refinancing means I'm going to go take out an additional mortgage that'll be placed against my home because I want to go to London. I want to go live next to Mr. Carter. I want to go on vacations like the Joneses, right? And they go out and they live lavish for a few years. Then retirement hits in 5 years and their income is drastically cut. And now the $1,200 a month that they thought they could afford, they can no longer afford. They didn't have ample savings that were put away to help them address the needs of that new mortgage. What happens, technically speaking, anyone know what the definition of foreclosure is? Anyone know what it? So how about repossession? What happens when you don't make your car payment? Repossession, right? So the language, the definition of a failure to meet your obligations under an auto loan, the consequences are repossession. The failure to make your mortgage payments, it is a technical term, but many people don't know this. And we're fortunate to live in New York State. I'm going to tell you this right now. So I've spent over 20 years as a mortgage counselor with Home Headquarters. My primary position there was as a foreclosure prevention counselor. I oversaw that first-time home buyer program during the height of the financial crisis in 2008. And what many people don't understand about the term foreclosure, it is a legal term. Foreclosure is The minute you are 3 months behind on a mortgage, on day 91, technically, you have entered the realm of something called foreclosure, where the bank can now technically seize your home based on the fact that you have missed three mortgage payments. Again, we are fortunate to live in New York State because New York State has some legal protections that allow you to fight for the home a little bit longer. But guess what? In states like Texas, Florida, many other red states that you can think of, on day 91, the sheriff is at your house. Your possessions are being escorted out of the home on day 91. Not can I go to court, not can I appeal, not can I go to my cousin and see if I can get it to you by Tuesday. Day 91, it is done. One thing that the bank does not accept, and I hated to have these earnest conversations, but the bank does not accept tears. The only thing the bank will take in that instance is a check to make them whole. Not only is it a legal term when you enter foreclosure on day 91, but there are additional costs. So now if the mortgage payment was $1,000 per month, right, and you're 3 months behind, the cost to initiate a foreclosure is typically around $4,500. So in order to cure that mortgage now, you not only have to come up with the $3,000, you have to pay the $4,500 on top of that too, right? So now you're looking at $7,500. So when I talk about saving and planning for emergency events in a household budget and what these things should look like, and especially, again, if you are at the stage in that curve where I'm nearing retirement, you do not want to take on additional debt. You do not want to do things like start refinancing things where ultimately it's going to start costing you more, but your income will be lower. Those are all things that should factor into what your household budget looks like. I'm not giving specifics because each of your households will be different. There will be different considerations for every one of your households, including my own. So for example, I have a 15-year-old now. He is in 10th grade, which means in 2 years, my financial picture is about to look drastically different. Do you know why? College, right? So the school that I attended and I wanted him to attend, when I attended, I remember there were riots on campus because the annual tuition went from $27,000 a year to $31,000 a year. That school is now over $65,000 per year for that same school. That takes planning in order to be there, right? So it will take not only that, it's going to take some faith. It's going to take a whole bunch of God being in our corner. It'll take some scholarships, but it won't be possible without this man. So we'll start with that, even for the consideration to get him in. And so those are the things, again, for each of you, your households, you need to start factoring that in. And especially, again, if you have younger children and you plan for them to go to school, there are savings plans that you can get into immediately that will place those savings away for school for your children. Again, they will reduce the college is the second one up there. And the reason is it will reduce your taxable income today. Those are essentially what other families use as something called a tax shelter. If I took away all of that money and put it into a position where I'm saving for the future for my kids, my taxes are reduced every year. So if I buy the house, I get the mortgage tax interest deduction. That is a savings plan. What happens when I pay off that mortgage? I own all the equity in there, right? That is now a vehicle. One of the ways that I'm able, fortunately, to finance my child being in school, we talked about this earlier, I had the fortune of being able to pay off a mortgage. So I have a home that is debt-free, that if I needed to borrow against that home, there is ample equity in that home to be able to help us to pay for his schooling. That was a very, very precise plan that we had in place in order to help me consider how we would pay for school for my son. And the same for any of you that are in this situation. Again, this is why real estate is so important. Other communities were able to leverage the land and the homes that they bought. They financed their children being able to go to school. They then passed down those assets to that children who utilized them to put their children through school. And this is how they built a wealth gap and a distance between us of $14 for every $1 that we have, largely because of the fact that they own that real estate. Okay, so one other thing is how can I consolidate if they want consistent payments? Who knows what it is to consolidate? Someone asked, how can I consolidate, or should I consolidate my loans, my payments? I have more than one credit card, for example. I have auto payments. I have school loans. I have a personal line of credit. I have multiple things that I'm making payments on every month. And in total, those payments are in excess of X amount of dollars. So the question that someone is asking is it a good idea to go to a bank and refinance all of those things into a single loan where I can just make one payment instead of making 6 or 7 payments? Any opinions on there? Yes. This feeds my soul. When my folks are savvy enough to understand, because this was a trick question in a way, right? So I presented it to you in a way where most folks will go, well, that's easy. Yeah, I'd just rather make one payment, right? But it depends on what that consolidation would look like. So if I'm already on a fixed income and I'm coming to plead to the bank to get into a place of consolidation because I just need to make my life easier and I want to lower my payments. Typically what happens is, yes, those payments would be lowered depending on the interest rate, but there are several factors here that also account. If you took all of that debt and you consolidated, and now instead of having 10 years to pay it off, I gave you 2 years to pay it off, what happens to those same payments? Now the payments have gone up because you have less time to pay it off. They want you to pay it off more aggressively. So you go in for a consolidation and they say, yeah, the rate's lower. Sure, I'll give you a point lower. I'll give you 1.5 points. But now I'm only going to give you 2 years instead of 15 to pay for it. Now your payment went from $600 a month to $1,250. Did that help you in that situation? No. So it really depends. And again, anytime that you're approaching one of these situations where you're looking at a consolidation, the thing that you can do to prepare yourself, whether you're going in for an auto loan, and for you young folks that are going out and maybe buying your first or second cars, you don't go to the dealer to get financed. I don't know if anybody's had this conversation with you guys, but you never walk into a car dealer looking for a loan from a car dealer. You go to a bank. I'm glad somebody's paying attention. Yes. So the number one thing that you can do to arm yourself to be prepared is learn how to read your credit report. Make sure that it is accurate. Make sure that it's yours. And make sure that you are paying your bills on time so that you're receiving the best possible rate. Once you have those things in order, pull that credit report and go into the bank that offers the financing, where you will get a much lower rate from the bank. And believe it or not, this is how simple it is. I'll tell you how easy it is to do this. I've applied for a car loan from my desk while on lunch. And I have a 30-minute lunch break, and my bank will have a check written out in the amount of that car loan before the lunch break is over. That's how fast it is. And especially if your credit is in order, they will lend you just like that. So the other thing is, once you have that, you want to be armed. Then you go to the car dealer, you take the check. The power dynamic changes. When you walk into the car dealership before, if you didn't have the credit report, and you're at their mercy, going like, man, I just need a car to get to work. Guess what's going to happen? Oh, you're going to get a car. The rate that they will give you for that car and the vehicle that you will get for that car, you might be paying 48% interest on a 2006 Ford Escort with 3 wheels on it. Right? That's what you may leave off of that car lot with. So it's very important that you understand to arm yourself the best way that you can, pay your bills on time. The other thing is, again, a savings, a down payment for there. Typically any large purchases that you're going to make, you want to make sure that you put yourself in a position where, yes. So here's the difference. Yes, it will be a hard pull, but here's what happens when you go to the car dealership. Good credit, no credit, bad credit, right? You seen the commercials? Remember that guy, Fusillo? There is a reason why he had the tagline, good credit, bad credit, no credit. You are leaving here with a car today. And the reason is when you go through the dealer, they shop your information to hundreds of financing companies around the country. They give them your personal information. They'll say, listen, man, I really don't care what you give them. Just send me back some numbers so I can put them in a car and tell them how much it's going to be. And by the time you get it back, what you don't know and why you're leaving that day is they have 150 offers from all of the people that they gave and ran your credit through. All of those firms now have access to your information, 150, right? And I present the first offer to you and I say, we got a Ford Escort. At this one, I'll give you a Ford Escort, 48% interest, 3 tires on it, no back seat. Will you take it? And it's like, I can't, no, I'm not taking. That payment is $650. I don't want that. You know what? I can't let you leave here today. I'm going to do you one better. I got a Ford Bronco, 2008. It's got all 4 tires. And I'm only going to charge you 40%. That payment's only, let me do the math. He goes through his little list of paper. This one's $604. What about that? I lowered you $45 a month. Can you afford that one? And you say, no, that's it. I can't do this. I got to go. And then as you're walking out of the door, he go, I got one more. Let me go. What about this? Because you're my man. Well, we're gonna waive. I would not let you leave here like that, right? So now I'm gonna give you 33% interest on a 2010. This one's got, you know how all the other cars had roll down. This one's got automatic windows on it, everything. I'll even give you a half a tank of gas. 33% interest. Got your payment down for you, only for you. I got your payment down to $541 a month right now. It's an 8-year car loan. You're going to be paying on it for 8 years. It's a 2010. It's already 2023, right? Going on 24. And an 8-year loan. But I did it. I got your, what do you need to pay? And then that's the next, when they get you to, what do you need the payment to be at? And that's when they got you. Because now they go through the thing. They find the offer that matches out of all 150 hard pulls that are there. So when you get your credit report, the reason why I went through that story is the moment after you do that, you're going to get your credit report and you will see the inquiry section on your credit report. For those of you who were here in the first class, how much did inquiries represent? What percentage of your points on a credit report score? 10%, right? So if you had an 850 credit score, 10%, it's worth 85 points. How long do inquiries stay on your credit report? 2 years. Inquiries remain on your credit report for 2 years. So when you go to that dealer who has shopped your personal information to 150 people, those inquiries remain on the credit report for 2 years. And you're risking 10% of your credit score based on the number of folks that you have given access to through your credit report, as opposed to going to the bank, giving it to one person. They give you the rate. They already tell you what the car rate is when you go there. When they run your credit, they just want to make sure that you can afford to pay it back. So as long as you can afford to pay it back, you've only running it with the bank They're going to give you the rate that they already told you they're going to give you up front. There's no more, whatever the sticker says on the window at the bank, that is the rate. It's not different. They're either going to qualify you or not qualify you. So there are distinct advantages to being able to go through a bank as opposed to going through an actual auto dealer who will shop your personal information everywhere. And just so we're clear, because there are people in this room who weren't here to understand how a credit score is derived. 10% we just mentioned was based on inquiries. So 85 points of your credit score. As a matter of fact, Maria, can you advance the slides to the section that had the credit scores on it? Yes. So right here. Thank you, Maria. That slide there. So the amount of outstanding debt, what we just talked about. I had someone in here who immediately from last class went home and said, you know what? I'm going down to pay down all these balances on these credit cards. I need these lower immediately, because the impact that it will have on the next cycle when they run her credit score, because she lowered the amount of debt that she has, her score will automatically rise. The more debt that you have outstanding, the lower your credit score. This is one of the other reasons that we mentioned you never go over the 1/3 on the credit cards, because that outstanding debt. The length of your credit history. One thing that I would advise for that person that went home and paid down those credit cards and got them lower, not to close a credit account, right? You don't close your oldest account. Your oldest accounts help you. It's something called aging, right? Where the older those accounts are, it means you've had access to credit for so long. And especially for you young folks, you go out and you open a credit card now, even if you carried a zero balance on it, you don't close that off. And especially the longer that credit card is open, the more it is helping your credit score. The types of credit, revolving, right? We talked about credit cards. Revolving means every time I get a balance on a credit card, if it's $1,000, I go use $333. I pay it off at the end of the month. That limit revolves right back up to $1,000. Every time I use it, I use $250. I pay it off. The limit revolves right back to $1,000. That is a revolving. An auto loan is different. I borrow $10,000 for an auto loan. They give me 7 years to pay it off. I start at $10,000. The balance gets lower in year 9 or year 6, 5, 4, 3 until it reaches 0, right? That is a term loan. You need to make sure that you have a correct mix of the types of credit, including a revolving, which is the credit card, a term such as an auto, and a bank account counts as a type of credit as well. So make sure, you young folks, that you do have a bank account. For those of you who have not opened any credit cards yet, or feel that you don't have the ability or score to receive a credit card, there is something called a secured credit card. For those of you who are unfamiliar with a secured credit card is something that helps you to build credit. If you have no credit or bad credit, you're allowed to place a certain amount of money in an account at a bank to be held. That money is to be held in that account. You will then be issued a credit card with that limit on it. And every time you use a credit card, you still have to pay it back. Do you get access to the money in that account that is being held? No, you don't. That money is actually being held in case you actually default, in which case their money is already in the account. But your secured credit card is now reporting to all 3 of the credit bureaus, and it says that you have a credit card now. Does it show that you have a secured credit card on your credit report? Absolutely not. The only people that actually know that that's a secured credit card is the bank that issued it. That is it. So that is one way that you can start to build your credit for yourself. And the last thing we talked about is new credit. New credit is typically what's called an inquiry. And again, Maria, can you advance just, I think it's 2 slides when it goes to how long something stays on the credit report? One more. So this is the information for you young folks who are unaware of how long this information stays on. We mentioned the inquiries or that car loan, the 150 people that are getting access to there. 2 years that information remains on there. Also, young folks that weren't here, the first class I talked about, when you go to the mall, Typically, they're inundating you with orders that say, hey, would you like to sign up for a credit card today? And we can offer you 20% off. Every time you sign up for one of those, you're giving away that personal information, which leads to the inquiries. It's 10% of your credit score, and it remains for 2 years. Whether or not you get approved, it has an impact on your score. Negative information, if you are late on any account, young folks that weren't here last time, grace period. Anybody know what a grace period is? I want to see if these young folks tell me they got an extra 15 days to make that payment. We were going to school them real quick. So a grace period is typically what they tell you, or is some additional time to make a payment. But what a grace period really is that is the last day before we can start charging you a late fee. And what that also means is after that day, that information is now negatively reported on your credit report because you did not make the payment on time. So do not get into the habit of thinking you have extra time to make a payment on a grace period. One other thing that made me laugh, when someone came in, one of the first things they said was, Ricky, you know how you said, if something's due on the 1st, you don't go make that payment on the 1st? And she made the payment on the 20th instead of the 1st. So when I was younger, if they told me the 1st, I would always wanted to be slick. Kids always push the rules a little bit, right? I get paid and the 1st falls on a Saturday. So I'm like, I'll just go pay them on Monday then, right? I'll go to the bank on Monday, put it in, thinking that gave me some kind of advantage in paying them late. When no, technically, I'm just making a late payment. That's all. And again, if you don't make the payment within the 15-day grace period, it does begin to impact your credit. Bankruptcies remain on your credit report for 10, judgments for 7 years. Also, young folks, to understand the impact of what this means. When you go to make these things, if I'm reading a credit report, by the way, the first things on your credit report, your name, your address, your social security number, right? Who can tell me what the very next thing is on the top of a credit report? You might have how many different accounts on there? You could have your auto loan, your mortgage. What do you think is the very next line after your address and your personal information? Actually, technically, you're right. It's the scores. The things directly under the scores, the very next things listed after the scores, this information right here. It says if you have a bankruptcy, if you have a judgment, if you have a lien. And why does it say it at the top? Because I'm not even going to waste my time to give you it. I know all the information I need to know in the first 5 lines. If I see the word judgment, this means someone had to sue you to get their money back. A judgment means someone has taken you to court in order to recoup the money that you either borrowed or failed to pay back in a timely fashion. If I see a judgment, if I see bankruptcy, and this is for my young folks, am I likely to lend you money? Does that credit report tell me everything that I need to know about your history of making payments? So this is where I'm saying how difficult it is. Please do not underestimate the impact of what these things mean in terms of your credit history. Today, it sounds good. Like I got away, they left me alone. It remains for 10 years, it remains for 7. I'll just go get a car when I'm 28. You start out at 18 and go, I got time. I'll just wait till I'm 28. It comes off. So folks that grew up in my generation, we talked about some credit myths that we heard growing up. Some of those myths were, if you don't pay it for 7, if you ignore it for 7 years, it just comes off your credit report, right? So you heard it, right? Does that mean you don't owe the money because you swept it under the bed? This is like your mom tell you to clean the room and you take all the stuff and throw it under the bed and hopes that she doesn't see that the room is still not clean, right? Does that mean you don't owe the money? You still owe the money. One other thing that we talked about, young folks, is how that debt gets re-aged over time. So if 6 years go by and you're just at the window where you thought the 7-year mark is coming and it gets to come off my credit report, and then I call you and go, hello, yeah, Mr. Johnson, you know that $2,000 credit card payment that we never got from you, but you know what? It's tax season. We know that you just got your tax check. We're willing to settle that debt for you today and today only. We're going to offer you $500 to settle that debt. How many of you are taking that deal, young folks? 500 to get the 2,000 off the credit report. Because it's not coming off the credit report, number one. But number two, the minute that you've acknowledged, yes, I'm Mr. Johnson. Yes, I live at 212 Midland Avenue. Yes, that was my debt. No, I don't have any money to pay it. His job is done for the day. He didn't need you to make the deal. He didn't need you to accept the offer. What you have done by acknowledging that debt is just re-aged that debt and started the clock all over again. You gave him 7 more years to report that information. And again, it may not hit you until you're finally at a place where now you're a family man. Now you pay people. Now you want everybody to know, I got a good job. I'm Calvin from McDonald's. Remember Calvin from McDonald's? I pay people now. I got promoted to supervisor. I need a house now. And now you go to get the mortgage and that information shows up and you're like, man, that's only I'll pay that today. And you still, now it's been on 13 years. You pay the 500. That information still does not come off the credit report. You actually have to negotiate. Typically, if you want that bad mark to come off the credit report, the only way to do that is to pay that debt in full. And you have to negotiate in order to be able to do that. So moving into the last section, because we're getting perilously close to the end, I wanted to talk about some things which we broached a little bit earlier. Ultimately, we talked about what a savings plan would look like for most of our households, some of the key elements to building a solid budget that would have those things in there. We talked about college, retirement. We even brought up the wedding anecdote, right? Weddings are typically very expensive, running into the thousands and thousands of dollars for the folks that plan those out. But if you don't have a solid plan in place, I would not advise doing things like borrowing against your parents' home to be able to pay for a wedding, and especially refinancing them into a situation where it's an adjustable rate mortgage that your mom cannot afford and the house ends up being foreclosed on. That is a bad savings plan. So typically, anytime that you have a large debt, be it a home, auto, wedding, college, or any of those things, you need to factor in time. Time to be able to put that money away, take on additional jobs if you need to. Most folks don't. I worked a second job for about 10 years. And it was amazing to me how many people would come up to me and tell me, like, why are you working I don't understand why you're working 2 jobs. Why don't you just quit? At this time, during those 10 years, I had bought 2 homes, right? Started a family, ended up paying one of the houses off during that time, all because I had an ambition and a drive and an aggressive savings plan that I needed to have in place that I knew why I was doing it. It may not look the same to somebody who's on the outside. So sometimes you have to work a little harder to get the things that you want. That position that put me in, those 2 jobs for those 10 years, I have never looked back. And it was because I was fortunate enough to be able to work those 2 jobs, save that money, live off one income, aggressively attack and pay down a mortgage plan, which now it's still reaping benefits because in 2 years, where's my son getting ready to go again? College. And now I have an investment vehicle that I use, which was my first home, that will now finance an opportunity for him to receive his post-secondary education. The other thing, estate planning, very important. Yes, real quick question.
How would you address a couple that's getting married and they getting ready to purchase a house?
That is tough. If those folks, I had a cousin. I always have to relate this to similar stories, right? I had a cousin who owned a house over on Keene Place. Never forget this. They had owned the house for about 13 years, as a matter of fact. Mortgage got down. I believe they owed about $4,000 on the mortgage. The entire house had been remodeled. Top to bottom, had a new roof. Smaller home, but they had 2 children. It's a 3-bedroom house. And the parents, $4,000 mortgage on it. She comes to me because I'm overseeing the first-time home buyer program at home headquarters. And she says, oh, I don't know how many of you have heard of these Ryan homes or some of these bigger homes that are out in the suburbs, right? And I'll never forget, she comes to me and goes, we're looking at a Ryan home. And the house that they had originally bought was maybe $60,000. It was paid off, but fully remodeled. When I say top to bottom, basement, everything done. Beautiful house. A mortgage payment on there was under $400 a month, even on $4,000 remaining on the balance. It was roughly $382, including taxes for this house. So you go from a situation where you have a 2-person household, 2 incomes that are coming in with a $382 mortgage, and they decided they were moving into a new situation, and they were actually going to do renew the vows at their weddings. They had originally gotten married in the backyard. The first part was beautiful. They didn't go get a big church. They saved a bunch of money, got married in the backyard, put all that money into the house. The second part was a disaster. Second part was, we want to go live next to Reverend Carter. We have to. You see that Ryan home he's in? We want one of those. And that mortgage went from a $60,000 house and a $382 mortgage to a $225,000 house, which had a $2,500 a month mortgage that did not include interest. Right? So they went from $400 a month to $2,500 a month, interest-free for the first 3 years. So here's the small print. We snuck into the mortgage. We went, it's tight, but we can make it. It didn't include taxes. How much do you think taxes are on a $225,000 house, right? Well, roughly, I'll tell you 3.5% for Onondaga County. So now you're roughly $8,000 per year is added to there. So you can add another $500-$600 a month that's being added to this. So now you're looking at roughly $3,200 to live in it. You go from $400 a month to $3,300 a month, right? To complicate that, they bought a new car when they went out there because they needed the car. The car went back within 60 days. And here's the reality of that situation. Within 1 year, not only were they divorced due to the financial strain, they also lost the home. So the home that they took all of the equity from home one, they took $50,000 in equity from home one to place on home two, got into there, and it lasted 1 year. So my advice to young folks that are looking at situations where they're taking on a lot financially, right? My parents used to say your eyes are bigger than your stomach. This is a situation where I would have a stern conversation about the potential and what this looks like if you cannot carry this debt load. It is better for you to save and have these things up front and be able to pay for it in advance rather than finance and be paying for because if they finance that wedding, for example, $40,000 and they put it on credit cards and so on, it's $40,000 today. By the time you add the interest and how long it takes them to finish paying for it's no longer $40,000. So my advice with them would be to sit down with a financial advisor and a counselor, and in particular, probably a marriage counselor before they went too far down the road in terms of making a financial decision that could ultimately hurt them in the long term. And that goes for any of us. Anytime that you are looking at taking on a huge amount of debt, if you are looking at something that will impact you long term, it is very important that you be fully prepared financially. You've spoken to a financial advisor. You've had a second set of eyes reviewing the contracts that you are looking at or getting into, and that you understand what you're signing. Remember, the devil is in the details. Okay. And so last thing on there is estate and insurance planning. We've talked about this. For those of you who are in a position to do so, please consider looking at life insurance, not as a manner of saving, but it is insurance against the foreseeable future, right? And one of the things that it helps you to address in terms of barriers for families that cannot afford burial costs and so on and so forth, it is a savings mechanism. Because if you're not planning for it today, you're going to pay an exceptional amount for it somewhere down the line when your family is not prepared to have those things. So again, for those of you who have not considered that, young folks, it is not too early for you to look at life insurance and placing a policy in place. The consideration budget, we talked about what a household budget would look like. Her husband may be a microsurgeon that's earning $400,000 per year, and he wasn't going to retire for the next 15 years. His insurance would look very different from my insurance if I was making $50,000 a year and I had 3 years of working left. My wife needed to make sure that she could make up for the income that I would be missing from the home. And so in her case, she would need substantially more in order. I would imagine if he's making $400,000 a year, they probably live in a very nice neighborhood. The house is nice. Does she want to lose that if she loses him as well? No. So we need enough insurance to not only cover the burial cost. Insurance is not only for the burial cost, it is for maintenance afterwards. If we are leaving spouses or children or other things behind, it is also to make sure they are taken care of in the event that I'm not there. Same for me. If God forbid I walk out of here and something happened tomorrow, I'm not just paying for my funeral. My son is 15, which means he needed my income for the foreseeable future until he would have graduated from college and until he is on his feet. It is not enough for me to get the bare minimum of insurance just to cover my burial costs. So before we end tonight, I just wanted to take any questions that we have and the information that we went over today.
I'd like to ask a question concerning insurance.
Yes, sir.
I don't think we get enough information on the insurance because as a whole pastor, I have buried so many people. Thought they was in good shape with insurance that they had kept up for years. But when you get to a certain age, insurance people start talking crazy.
Mhm.
Other way, they want to put your premium out of sight. And they got the whole life and then the one that builds up equity.
Sir.
And so many people thought they had a plenty of money, and when they died, they had nothing. And the church has to help them get buried.
Yes. So this is why that conversation, especially again, for those of us who have parents that are nearing that age, if you are like me, my retirement window is a lot closer. 15 years can go by like this, right? So it's so important that we're reviewing this information when we're in a place where we're fully cognizant, aware, we're keen, we're sharp enough to go over this information. We should be having this information with trusted loved ones. All of the information, including those insurance policies, actually should be reviewed a minimum. My recommendation, once per year, your insurance should be reviewed by someone in your immediate and trusted circle to make sure that it is adequate to meet your needs. So for example, again, you just stated, there's some additional health things that may come on and onset. We took on some additional debt because my wife had to go into a nursing home. So all the money we thought we had in savings here, we used up placing her there for an emergency surgery. And now all of a sudden that insurance policy isn't adequate to cover everything that we need in the event that one of us unfortunately demises. So again, having someone in your entrusted circle reviewing your information, including your children or any entrusted spouse, to make sure that it's adequate. Once a year, you should be reviewing those insurance policies. And young folks, one thing that I would get familiar with in terms of coming to terms with your own mortality. If someone in your family passes, typically I know the elders are the ones to make all of the arrangements. They are the ones that are saddled with going in and arranging the burial cost and so on and so forth. But that is information that actually needs to be passed down, right? I got a crash course in that information when my mom died. And I can tell you how traumatizing it is to go from losing a mom and not having 48 hours to figure out how to plan a funeral, right? And especially my mom had no insurance. So we get to Garland, and thank God they were there and they priced us fair. But I needed a check within 2 days for $8,000 to have my mom's body taken from the hospital to there. And then there's to pick out the coffin, right? That needs to be paid for. Oh, and they didn't tell you your family didn't buy the land up at Oakwood. Now you need to buy the burial plots. One day you want to be buried close to your mom. Now you don't need one plot. You have 5 siblings. There's your mom. There's your dad. So now all of these costs are factored into what that burial fee looks like. So I implore you, if you have the opportunity, don't wait to learn those lessons until it's far too late. Don't be afraid to approach your parents and ask them about what insurances that they have in place in order to do that. And it's not for you to be able to inherit, Mom. This isn't about me having money. This is about me making sure that I can put you to rest comfortably, that the rest of the family is not strained financially in order to be able to cover your burial costs. And typically, you do want to have a conversation about legacy and wealth building. I want to start a legacy within our family where we're not going to leave behind a legacy of debt by not having the proper insurance in place. I do not want to pass that cycle of trauma on to my children, so I'm going to make sure that we're properly prepared to do that. That means I'm going to be the financial steward. Got it? Yes, sir.
There's another side to that insurance, like insurance too.
Yes, sir.
And when you buy insurance policy, you gotta make sure you read the fine print about the years, the number of years they say that policy for. Because you'll think you set for life, and then all of a sudden your age changed and you find out they canceling you out. I mean, I just experienced that.
Very, very important point. This is, again, why those policies need to be reviewed on an annual basis. Once a year, you should be pulling out all of those, and especially, folks, not only our life insurance policies, even your auto policies, young folks. I don't know if you knew this, but you do know that they offer the new clients lower rates than they are. So if I ask you how long you've been with your insurance company, especially for your auto, and you say 8 years, you know that they'd offer me a cheaper rate if I signed with them today than you who've been there for 8 years, right? So yes, once a year, you should be even shopping your auto policies. This is the nature of insurance. This is how it works. And so if you're not forcing them to do their work, they're just going to accept your payments and keep accepting your payments. And that's how that works. And at the end, I hate to say this, but the goal of insurance is actually not to pay out. So they're driven by a profit margin, and the lower the amount that they pay out, the more profitable they are. So this is why sometimes you'll see folks that are even with your health insurance, when you're fighting for them to pay certain claims, they refuse to pay those certain claims because it's not profitable for them. So this is why your health, your auto, your life insurance, all of those things should be reviewed annually, no matter what. Don't be afraid to have that conversation. Yes.
I don't know anything about insurance, but I did have to experience helping my mother and other family members, go through that process of not having people covered. So for me at my age, I wouldn't even know where to start. So do you know, like, do you have any referrals as far as like companies that actually at my age you have to go?
So I would always, I never give a direct referral, number one, right? The thing that I would say for any purchases you make, this is a general rule of thumb. There's a minimum of 3. You should always shop a minimum of 3. You never go to one car dealer and think that one car dealer gives you the thing. And as a matter of fact, this is an important point because in terms of your credit score, this is how your credit scoring works. If you were shopping for a mortgage, you are to go to a minimum of 3 lenders in order to apply for that mortgage. As long as you go to all 3 lenders in 1 week, it will not impact your credit score. It doesn't lower your credit score. The minute you start, if you did one in January, then you did another one in June, and then you go at the end of the year, it does impact it. When they see that you're shopping for 3 of the same thing in one, it has a lower impact on your credit score. So in other words, if I go to 3 car dealers, if it's just 3, you don't want to go to the one that's doing the 150. You can go to 3 and get the lowest ones. And that's the same for here. So with an insurance, I would book an appointment with 3 different insurance agencies. And a really good insurance agent is going to do just what I did. When they sat down with me, they said, Ricky, how old are you? How much do you make per year? How many children do you have? What will your benefactors need to survive if you're not here? And that comes out to a certain figure, right? And they would say, based on what you're earning right now, and if something happened to you tomorrow, they would need a minimum and to pay for college, they would need a minimum of like $1.5 million. Here's a policy that is suitable for what your needs are today. Does that change? When my kids are off to college and they're grown, will my insurance needs change? Absolutely. I don't have to pay for them to go to school anymore. They're no longer minors, right? So the policy might look different. But I would implore you to book at least, and they're free. The insurance agents are going to come because they're trying to sell you something. But when you're prepared, the best thing that you can do is you walk in with the other 2 policies because now they have to compete against each other to offer you the best rates. All right. Well, thank you, folks. I think we're getting ready to close out for tonight. I want to thank everybody for coming out. This is so amazing. I'm so glad when I can see folks perked up. I know that you're retaining and getting some of this information. I'm so grateful that Dr. Coward reached out to talk about this stuff. As you can see, I get really passionate about teaching it. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys in the next class. And for those of you who didn't necessarily get a chance to pull your credit report, I'm a teacher, so I'm still going to be checking by next workshop to make sure we made it. Okay, thank you guys so much for coming out. Good to see you young folks out tonight too. Dr. Coward.
Thank you so much. Let's give Jesus a hand praise for new knowledge. New knowledge. Truly, God is helping us to become better stewards of what He has provided. And we give Him praise, we give Him honor for all that He has done. Thank you so much, Ricky, for a most insightful and informative presentation. Well delivered. We thank you. Now, would you open your green folders there, if you will? We have an evaluation form. It's very, very important for us. And if you could fill that out, we certainly would appreciate it. It's very simple. And it seems as though, no, the form should say April 27th. The evaluation form right at the top should say April 27th. No. You don't have a form? Okay. Sister Brandon, would you ask Nora or Della for extra forms? If you would just raise your hands, these forms are very important for us. If you don't have a form at the top, that says April 27th. It's a white form. April 27th. Pastor Reed needs one. And mother as well. So 2 here. Thank you, Sister Brandon. We are so appreciative to have so many in-person participants this evening. As you know, we also have participants on Zoom. Again, I would like to acknowledge Elder Reed and Mother Reed for hosting us for this event. And we have so many of our pastors with us this evening. It's wonderful to see so many of them out. Mother Reed, Mother Carter also with us. And we're so thankful to have them. I would like to remind you, we have one last session, 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, May 11th, on a Thursday evening, right here. Bring your questions. It seems as though there's quite a bit of interest in insurances. It seems as though. And I know that talking about the difference between whole life and term, what that means, etc. Bring your questions. And I think Ricky will focus a bit on insurances for that last session. Yes, Maria.
Please help me. Those questions are so helpful in preparation for the next workshop. They are really great questions. Don't be afraid to write those down and hand those in, please.
Mm-hmm. And I thought it seems as though it went very well for you to respond to those questions, and it leads right into the next discussion. So that's great. That's great. Now, Maria, will you collect the evaluation forms or? Okay. And again, we look forward to seeing you on Thursday, May the 11th, right here. That will be our last session.
And that's my mom's birthday, so I'm coming for the fireworks. Make sure you're here on May 11th.
Pastors that are here, please invite your members to come to that last session. The doors are open. We welcome them to come, please. Are there any other announcements? Pastor Reed, would you please come and give us our benediction, please?
Shall we stand? As we look to the Lord, Father, we thank you and we give you praise again. Thank you, Lord, for all that has gone forth here. Thank you, Lord, for the information. Lord, help us to gather this information and retain it and do the work that's called for. We ask you that you would bless us all now as we continue in this evening. Bless us with sweet sleep and good rest, that we will wake up in the morning saying, God, we thank you, for this is the day that you have made. We're glad and we're going to rejoice in it. We pray, Lord, that you would bless us now with your provision, with your protection, and with your guidance. We pray it all in Jesus' name. Thank God. Amen.